Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
We're all set, cocked, locked. Here we go. Your dial is set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being in class with us today. Although he won't admit it publicly nor privately, this is Jason's favorite broadcast. Guineith Isaacs is with us live in Australia. Welcome, Guineith.
Hello, Vincent. How are you this morning?
Well, it's great to be on the air with you on Jason's favorite broadcast. Thank you. Thank you for being with us. So, Guineith, what is happening in Australia that you'd like to share with us? Or do you want to go right into Harry and Meghan, or do you want to go into the cabal that seem to be involved with bribing our Congress to protect us from knowing what's in our food? Where would you like to start?
Oh my gosh, I think the flooding I think I ought to mention the flooding that is happening in Australia at the moment, in Sydney, and also in Brisbane as well. There is massive flooding in all down the east coast of Australia. We haven't been so badly affected here. We have had water flowing into our dams, which has been a good thing. Since Saturday night, Sunday morning, we have had here in the rain gauge at the farm, we have had approximately 140 millimetres of rain in the rain gauge here. And that has been over a period of days. In one 48-hour period, we received well over 100 millimetres. That's 4 inches of rain, which is nice. That's good. And but other places don't regard it necessarily as being such a good thing because they're deep underwater, and the floods have been of such magnitude that houses have been flowing down rivers, literally. I don't know if I sent any of those photos to you or not. I don't think I did. But they are certainly out there on YouTube of people standing on their balconies filming a house floating down a river, which is obviously not good for whoever owns the house. Does that make sense, Vincent?
Absolutely. When Mrs. Finelli and I spent some time in California, there was some record rain, and in Santa Cruz, California, houses were, they called them mudslides, and there was so much rain that trees were falling over, and houses were, if they're built on a hill, they'd slide right down the hill. So I've witnessed that. It's terrifying. Where do you go? Where do you step that's not muddy? And, roughly within the last 2 weeks here at the farm, we had about 7 inches of rain in, maybe 2 or 3 days. And everything was muddy. Everywhere you stepped, it was terrible. And we lost a couple cows. A cow and calf died, because of the rain. Our neighbors lost calves. So all around us, the rain was quite devastating here in Missouri. So I do know what you're talking about. And, that's something so what's the takeaway here at USA Prepares? What can be learned from that? Well, the last thing you want to do is buy property that is below a dam. You don't want to do that because eventually that dam can fail. And if it does, you're like the first one to know, when you, for a few seconds, until you drown, that kind of a thing. So it's really a good idea to set your house on a knoll, on a hill high up, from the water flow. And that's what we did here at our farm. So our house is on a knoll and our farm is on a mountain, the Ozark Mountains. So they kind of are gently rolling mountains where we are, but we're on a hill. So when it rains, the water runs downhill. It doesn't flood the house. And that's what really is what you should consider doing. Any comments, Guineith, about that?
Yeah, the time to think about preparing for a flood or what you might do if there is a flood at your location is not when the flood is imminent. You need to be thinking about this from the get-go, from when you are laying the foundation of your house. And our house, I don't think it will ever flood. It's built on I think I've described to you personally where our house is and why it won't flood, but I'll describe to the class. It's on a very slight ridge, and it's probably only around about 12 to 18 inches higher than probably only about 12 actually inches higher than the surrounding landscape. But it's that slight ridge, and on one side there's a drainage line which goes downhill quite rapidly and down our driveway, so that in any rainfall event of over about an inch, we get water running down the driveway outside of our door. But it's never to the magnitude of where, it would actually, the volume of water that goes down there, the driveway is so wide, you could turn a truck around in there. We have had, the big water trucks, they're like milk trucks almost. We've had them up there, up the driveway and turning around up and then going down the other side. So this is not a suburban driveway. This is a farm turnaround that's sitting outside our front door that the water can flow down our driveway and either into one of the dams or soaks down in the front paddocks or off the property. And on the other side, there is, once again, there's a drop probably of about between 6 and 12 inches, but then it goes down into the garden and then into quite a deep valley. And there's a dam in the valley, which is our dam, which is below the house. And there's not really any houses below that dam. I should point that out. Okay, so we considered that when we were putting that dam in, that, and we ascertained that if it failed, which it won't, because it was built properly in the first place, with a proper overflow and all the rest of it, but if it failed, it's not going to really affect anyone, because there's really nobody built downstream of it, not for many, 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 many kilometres. But yeah, this is it. You've got to think of that, and you've got the people who built this house. We didn't build this house, but the people who built it had to think about what they were doing, and they made sure that this house would basically never flood. That there's drainage lines on one side, drainage lines on the other side. They both flow downhill away from the house, and there's no way that the water... We had a major flood event here in 2015, 2016, where we had water flowing across the paddocks for months. And every time I stepped out onto my driveway, it was a river, probably only about 2 inches deep, but it was, at the deepest. But it was a river about 2 inches deep at the deepest. Any time I wanted to walk out of my front door, I would have to get my feet wet. and that was how it was in 2015, 2016, not just for a day, not just for a week, but for probably about 3 months. And we had overland flow of water all across our farm for about 3 months, and about the only dry place on the whole farm was this little ridge that our house was built on. Does that make that's very sensibly designed location for a house, Vincent? Does that make sense to you?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And let me share with you in the class some of our thoughts. So when we were building our house, we excavated for a basement. And when you excavate for a basement, you don't want to disturb much of the land other than where you're digging. You don't want to loosen up that soil. So you leave that. Think of it like you're going to build a swimming pool. You don't want to disturb any of the soil other than the hole for the basement or for the pool. So what we did was we very carefully excavated probably another 18 inches outside where the basement walls would be. Then we laid of course we had a footer and we poured the basement walls. But right at the footer, or just below the footer, we put crushed stone, white limestone crushed. And the size of the limestone would probably be about, an inch or so, maybe a little larger than that, 1 3/4 maybe. So we put that down, and we put perforated 4-inch pipe, plastic pipe, which would be PVC pipe. And we put that around the perimeter. And then it has holes in it, and the holes are about the size of a dime. And then what you do is you put some black plastic over that, and then you put more rock on top of that. And the idea is the plastic will prevent the holes in the pipe from getting plugged up. And then you put you arrange those pipes so that they tip downhill 1/4 of an inch per foot roughly. And you aim it downhill. And there's a location that's downhill, and we have the pipe draining out what's called to daylight. Daylight means it shows up outside, and you can see where these pipes are. And what happens is when it rains, the water runs into the ground. It percolates through the dirt. It gets to the bottom of below the floor of the basement, and it gets into this pipe, and then it runs downhill, and it just travels out and goes down to a field. And that is how you can prevent water from entering your basement. And we've never, ever had, no matter how much water has rained here, 7 inches in a couple days, we've never had water in the basement. And that's how you prevent it. You can, if you do your basement properly, and if you engineer it properly, you won't have flooding. But how many people think about that? How many people just dig a hole, put the basement wall, the footer in, pour the walls, then pour the basement floor, and say, we're good to go. Let's hope it doesn't rain. But that's the way you do it. So either you build your house above the ground and water won't come in, or you do it the way we mentioned, unless you live in the desert. Guineith and I will be right back. So it used to be around our neck of the woods in Missouri and also in Virginia, I know those two locations for sure, where the government would pay a portion, usually 3/4 of the cost, or sometimes more, of building ponds for farms. And the soil and water conservation guys and the USDA would come out and they'd walk around and they'd say, hey, here's a good place for a pond. And what they'd look for is an area where runoff would collect. And they could dig, have a hole dug with a backhoe and a front end loader and set up a dam. And water would eventually fill that hole. And if you had the right kind of clay in the bottom of the hole, it would hold water. But if you had extreme rain, that dam would overflow. So what Guineith mentioned was something called an overflow. And that is an area cut out of the dam, the side of the dam wall, where it's a little lower, let's say 2 feet lower than the dam wall. So what happens is, as the water fills up, if there's too much water for the dam to support, there's a spill area or an overflow area where the water escapes prior to it destroying the dam wall. And here in Missouri, we call them spillways, or overflows. And, I guess in Australia, they call it an overflow. So if you build a dam, you need to know about that. But make sure you don't put your house or your barn or, your personal property below the dam should it fail. Gwyneth, back to you.
Yeah. That's sort of basically what's been happening. The other thing is when you've got when you've built a brand new dam, it's a good thing that you mentioned about the substrate. Okay, we basically had a guy with an excavator come in, and he dug out this particular dam for us. I gave him a set of instructions. I said, dig until you get to the bedrock. And you couldn't do that on just any property, because in some areas the soil is hundreds of feet deep. Okay? Around here the soil is between 1 and 6 feet deep. So the bedrock is not very deep down. And I think that he actually dug, because it was in the valley, he dug probably about 10 feet deep. You will tend to get deeper soil in a valley than on a ridgeline, because valleys tend to attract silt and they attract mud when they get floods go through them. And if it's a valley, it's going to have floods going through it at some time. For new members of the class, I actually trained as an environmental scientist at the University of Melbourne. So this is really good to consider when you're thinking about where to put a house. Okay, so it's not a good idea to put a house in the bottom of a valley, because even if it's a very deep and very wide and very shallow valley, it's going to flood at some stage. The best location for a house is either on a ridge line or somewhere on the above what's called the 100-year flood level. So that on the ridge line is a better location, because you'll never get flooded out if you're on a ridge line. But being on a ridge line has other problems. There tend to be more winds, and it tends to be, if you're wanting to put in a well, then it's not going to be a very good location for a well. So this is why people build their houses on the side of valley walls, especially when they're very wide and very shallow valleys with very wide sort of U-shape. That's but yeah, if you're going to build, you have to make sure that you build above a line, which your municipality will probably be able to tell you about, called the 100-year flood level. And probably that will only, become close to being flooded every 100 years, so they say, but you best to be well above that level.
We'll be right back. Guineith is with us live in Australia. And I believe we are the only broadcast that has a regular instructor from another continent. And I'm delighted to be broadcasting with Guineith to get the Australian perspective. So we're talking about dams, and we're talking about protecting your property from flooding. And we're talking about a valley. And sometimes it's called bottom land, B-O-T-T-O-M, meaning low. And what happens is exactly what Guineith said. So the silt, the light dirt, will wash downhill. And where does it go? Well, to the lowest point. It can. And that is usually the bottomland. So bottomland is really the most fertile land, generally speaking. And where does all that fertility come from? Well, higher up. So the silt washes from the hills and it goes downhill and it collects in the bottomland. So bottomland is really great for farming, but it's also really great for flooding. And that's how it got to be so fertile, because of the flooding. And that's why it's flat, because it used to be, over time, many times flooded. So the bottom of the pond that this flooding causes is flat, and it's great for growing crops. And there aren't many rocks down there, because the rocks are left on top of the hills. So in the Ozark Mountains, we don't have a lot of soil, because over the millennia, it washed downhill. So that's kind of how it works. And generally speaking, we have noticed that on our farm, there are pockets of really deep topsoil. And the reason they're here is because of the Dust Bowl. This is my belief, from the 1930s. So soil went airborne from Kansas and Oklahoma and Texas, and some of it landed in Missouri. And if there were depressions in the ground, that's where it collected. So we have, in some places, topsoil 3 feet deep. Most people around here think topsoil at 6 inches deep is a lot. Well, it depends on exactly where you live and how many depressions you had and how fortunate you were to receive the topsoil during the Dust Bowl era of the 1930s in the United States. Guineith?
Yeah, that's about how it goes. With our valley, it's not a very wide valley, so it's more of a V-shaped valley than a U-shaped valley. So there's really no bottom land in it. It sort of goes straight down one side and then straight up the other side with a dry creek line in the middle. But there are things that you can do if you have a catchment on your farm. A catchment is an area that catches the rain that ends up in the creek valley, okay? And if you are fortunate enough to have either a whole catchment or almost a whole catchment on your farm, then that's a very fortunate situation for you, because it means that you can pretty well manage how water flows through that valley. And we've got that fortunate situation here in that most of the catchment for this valley is actually on our land. And what I'm in the process of doing is digging trenches on contour throughout the valley, so the water collects in these trenches and soaks into the subsoil. Now, what that does is it raises the level of the water table in the valley. And because like I said, because the soil is quite shallow on our farm, the aim of it is in the end to actually get a flowing creek through this valley. And this is an ongoing project, and it's going to be ongoing through several years. But what I'm finding now is that there's water in the valley on a more regular basis, or there's at least water in the pools in the valley on a more regular basis, because you get parts of the creek line that are deeper, and then it goes upwards and then continues on into a dry creek bed. And when it's all dry, like for instance in the middle of summer, this area would seem to be like a hole in the middle of the creek bed. but during the winter, it generally has water in that hole. And that wasn't happening when we first moved here. When we first moved here, there was practically never water in the holes except for a day or two after it had been raining. So, like I say, it's an ongoing process to get it to where to manage your catchment so that as much
Gwyneth, I need to interrupt for a second. We just heard a loud explosion here over the farm. We don't know what happened. So can you please continue? I don't know if it was a sonic boom. The whole building shook. It was a massive boom. I need to make sure everybody's okay. So please continue.
Yeah, sure.
I'll be back soon, okay?
Okie doke, yep. So, yeah, anyway, I hope that everything's okay on Vincent's farm. Oh my gosh. Getting back to catchment management is what this is called. You dig trenches on contour, either in the valley wall, or you put micro dams at various locations across the valley at certain places with overflows. When the water falls on the catchment, instead of it flowing straight down the creek valley, it stays in the trenches, it stays in the micro dams, and you will find that it infiltrates into the water table. The idea of this sort of micro dam is not, or this sort of trench on contour, which is called a swale, is not to store water on the surface, but it's to enable the water to infiltrate into the water table so that it can come up at a point further downstream in a spring. And this is how catchments are fed. Oh my gosh. I really hope everything's okay with Vincent with this explosion. That's how it is with catchments. That's how you manage it. But to be able to do that effectively, you really have to have access to the upper levels of the catchment area of your dam, of your valley. Oh my gosh. That's just how it is. Okay. We'll get on to the next story now, which is what we were going to cover. Prince Harry has got a job. And his job, he's moving into the corporate sphere. And he is going to be a publicist with a particular firm in America which provides mental health services to the staff of major corporations. So I'm just getting the news article up at the moment. Oh my gosh, well, it is kind of good that he is actually thinking about working for a living instead of just relying on handouts from various people. His role is to be, from what I gather, something of a publicist for this corporation, to be more or less the public face. He is going to be given a seat on the board. And, yeah,
Hey, I'm back.
He's going to be doing promotional work. Hello, we are, is everything okay?
Yeah, we heard this loud boom, and it shook the farmhouse, which is a stone farmhouse. The windows rattled. I mean, everything rattled. It was massive, and it was just one single boom. And so we called a business about several miles away, and we asked if they heard it too. We didn't know if it was, like a propane tank explosion or a sonic boom or whatever, but it was massive. And, they heard it too, and the dogs panicked, and it was quite something. But everybody's okay as far as we could tell. We checked with, the business downtown. There's like 3 businesses, a post office and a farm supply. But we called the farm supply, and everybody's okay there. But they absolutely heard it too. So it was concerning because it literally sounded like a massive, massive explosion. And every once in a while we hear these things. It's unsettling, and nobody knows where it comes from. Nobody knows. Oh. So it's just one more of those. But you're talking about Harry getting a job, and I'm looking at an article, Daily Mail, and his title is Chief, and this is made up. There's no such thing as this until Harry got this title. Chief Impact Officer. Let me spell impact, I-M-P-A-C-T. And they say it's for a $1.73 billion company in San Francisco, and it's a mental health coaching startup. It's called Better Up. Like batter up, but better. B-E-T-T-E-R space U-P. And they claim that they work with giant corporations like Hilton and Chevron. Now, this thing seems like smoke to me. It seems like they're selling something that is worthless. They say that they help people, feel better. And they say, well, the headline says that the Duke, that's Harry, is the Chief Impact Officer of Better Up, a $1.73 billion startup. Now, how do you have a startup that doesn't even have a product that is valued at $1.73 billion? That's amazing to me. No product. And the role will see him weigh on product strategy and charitable contributions, but he won't manage a team, they say. And they say the boss refuses to say if Harry's being paid, but he is perfect for the meaty, M-E-A-T-Y, role. We'll tell you what this role is. There's nothing meaty about it. He just shows up every once in a while, smiles, with his scruffy looking face, and, I'm pretty sure he gets compensated handsomely. Class tomorrow, Kyle's going to be with me, and I'm going to be talking about tips from the book with Kyle. And we're also going to be teaching about tires. We didn't finish the broadcast about tires. There's a lot more you need to know about tires. And we're going to teach you about how to protect your tires and wheels from being damaged by the tire company that, puts them on for you. And also, if you've got some questions about preparedness, plumbing, heating, electrical, solar, farming, whatever it might be, give us a call. And that's tomorrow, 9 a.m. through 11 a.m. Central Time. And the number to call is 866-582-9933. 866-582-9933. Guineith is with us. And so we're talking about Harry and the Silicon Valley startup company that hired, I guess that would be in quotes. They won't say if they're paying him what his compensation is, but, you can imagine that he is being compensated with an equity position, meaning he's getting stock. That would be my guess as to how he's being compensated. But this company, got $2,000 for 6 months of unlimited coaching, for each employee. So they charge a lot. They charge a lot for this coaching service that they have. And, one thing that I remember reading something about, for $360 a year, you can get a tune-up. That's $1 a day. You can get a tune-up and you can contact them and they can help you be happier. And this is just the most amazing concept to sell. I mean, if someone came to me and said, guess what, Vinny, we got a hot stock tip for you. There's this company. It's called Better Up. It's going to help people feel better. And, it's going to be worth a lot of money and you can buy stock in it. Now, I'm not saying that they have stock available for sale, but ultimately that's typically what happens with corporations. They sell stock, and selling stock is one of the ways you can get rich. And it's, you can counterfeit. That's one way. I mean, it's illegal, right? You can steal money. That's illegal. You can print money, meaning you can start a corporation and sell stock. That's like printing money almost. And so that's another way of getting rich quickly, and that's selling stock. And what is stock? That's betting on the come, meaning people buy shares of a corporation hoping that the company's shares will increase in value. So they buy them low typically and sell them high. That's typically what's done. It's not the only way. You can short stock too. But what I'm saying is that this concept of what this company and why they've employed Harry is amazing to me. That it's like selling hot air. Guineith, have I lost my mind, or did you read into it the same way I did?
From what I read in the article, it seems as if he's being employed as something like a publicist, which means that it's his job to stand there and smile and create a positive impression for the company. Now, with regards to the product that this company is selling, they want people to feel good about themselves. They want people to feel happy about themselves. And these people, they spend getting this help, and I'm saying that in quotes, from the company, from this better up company. They work for companies like Chevron. They work for companies like Facebook. Now, if you were working for Chevron, and there's this guy out there, he's quite an old man now. I think that he's still alive. And his name is called Pastor Lindsay Williams. And for many years, he was a chaplain. He was a minister of religion, and he was a chaplain to executives and also the regular drill workers of oil companies. And he would go up to places like Gull Island and Prudhoe Bay and places like this, and he would do religious services for them, and he would pray with them, and he would, be a listening ear, and hopefully try and get some Jesus into these people. And he said that they were the most evil, satanic people that he had ever met in his whole life. And he is a minister of religion, and it was his job to preach Jesus. And I like him. It seems as if he was doing the best job that he could to be a representative of Jesus Christ on this earth. But he said he'd never met such an evil bunch of people in his whole life as these oil company workers. And the higher up the totem pole you went in the oil industry, the worse it got. And at the top, they were pure Satanists. Now, I think that the reason why a lot of these people who work for companies like Chevron and Facebook are feeling bad about themselves is just maybe their consciences are not agreeing with them. Does that make sense, Vincent? I'd like to talk about these topics some more on the other side of the break.
Yeah, you bet. And this company raised $125 million in February. And how do you raise $125 million in fundraising and not even have a product? And your mission is to help people feel better. Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. So Guineith is with us, and we've been talking about Harry's new venture. It looks like he landed a job. Now, is it based on his qualifications? Is it based on his management experience? Well, he doesn't have any. He has no management experience. And this is what Rich Sheben talks about, like every time he's on the air. He talks about how, if you are part of, the royalty, or if you're part of a family, and you seem to get a job based on your relations. And it looks like Harry got this job not based on his expertise in management or administration or engineering or innovation or proven results. It's because of his name and where he was born, where he was born and who his mother was. So he's probably one of the few people on this planet who can trade by his first name. A lot of people know who Harry is, but he's got this alleged job. The company is valued after the latest round of fundraising, $125 million in fundraising. $125 million in fundraising. Isn't that interesting? They got some money from venture capital, about $300 million total so far. And they have yet to report any results. So that's why I say this seems like they're selling hot air. They want you to feel good. And they're going to, they go to companies and they say, we can help your employees feel better. Well, let me give you a prescription to feel better. And it's not going to cost you anything. It won't cost you the $360 tune-up fee per year. It won't cost you the over $3,000 fee for your coaching and counseling that they charge per person. But let me give you a recommendation, a prescription for feeling better. Okay, you can feel better if you get rid of those parasites that hang around you. So if you have some friends who are your friends because they want things from you, if you get rid of them, you'll feel better. Next thing, don't do stupid things. You'll feel better. Drugs. So if you don't do drugs, you'll feel better. If you don't chase parked cars, you'll feel better. If you don't run into fire hydrants, you'll feel better. So don't do stupid things. Eat well. That's number 3. Eat well. So my mom used to say, you are what you eat. Number 4, turn your hobby into a business. So if you like doing something, whatever it is, if you like making flies for fishing, turn it into a business. And there's a guy who did that. And you all have heard about him. He is the wealthiest guy in the corrupt state of Missouri. And he used to work at his dad's, as I've learned this, reportedly, he worked at his dad's liquor store, and he used to like making flies for fishing. And he started selling them. And what's the business now? It's called Bass Pro. So you can turn your hobby into your business. Now he's the wealthiest guy in the state of Missouri. And don't marry the wrong person. Those are 5 recommendations for happiness. Guineith?
Yeah, I would agree. I would say, that would be about the sum of it. I would say, find something that you really, really enjoy doing. Find some purpose in your life, something that you can do for a living that, doesn't just give you a sense of purpose, but actually has a sense of purpose. Okay? So it might be planting a fruit orchard. That's something that has purpose. Learning how to be a chicken farmer or a cattle farmer or some other type of farmer, a sheep farmer. They've all got a special set of skills associated with them. This is it. What Prince Harry is, from what I can gather from that news article in the Daily Mail, from reading it, it seems like his job is to be a publicist for a company that says, where he says, gee, this company is so wonderful, they will make you feel so much better, and you need to go out and spend all this money on hiring this company every year so that they can go and make your employees feel better. When the function that these companies perform is not something like planting a fruit orchard to feed millions of people, or even hundreds of people or even dozens of people. They do things, Chevron does things like goes and poisons whole water catchments. Okay? And I have the lowest opinion in the whole universe of anyone who would ever do something as insane as go and inject chemicals into a water table to poison it. That just makes me really, really, really angry. And they say, oh yeah, but we're getting gas out of it. I'm talking, of course, about gas fracking. Okay? Maybe if the employees of Chevron did not go poisoning water catchments all over the world through gas fracking, maybe their employees would not spend their entire lives feeling like pieces of dirt. That is my advice. You know, they probably won't listen to me because my advice, if they take it, is going to involve them losing money on, you know, the money that they've invested in all of this gas fracking equipment and technology. They're going to lose money if they follow my advice, but their consciences will leave them alone. Now, regular oil drilling, I would say that's probably not so harmful. And we kind of rely on oil for just about everything in this whole world. So, but apparently there's the supply of oil in this world is kind of running a bit low. And, you know, so this is it. You've got to take that into account. But that's an example. Using Chevron as an example. How you feel good is you don't go destroying stuff. Okay? You build up your own estate. Okay? And I would say, yeah, marry the right person. I gave that piece of advice to my son Theo and my other son many, many years ago. I said, listen, find the right girl and stick with her. And that's my advice to everybody in this whole world. That's the recipe for happiness is find a happy spouse and find a spouse that you are compatible with. Okay? And marry them and stay faithful to them. That's it. That's what you do. So more or less what I'm saying and what you're saying, Vincent, we agree. And if you are, for instance, a fact checker on Facebook, okay, where you go through everybody's Facebook posts, and if you find something that you don't agree with that raises your hackles and makes you go, ree, as a blue-haired feminist, you know, and then you go and you put a strike, or you go and you just delete the post, or you block their account or something like that, expect to feel like a piece of dirt at the end of the day. You're going to feel like a piece of dirt at the end of the day. And no amount of psychological head patting is going to provide any long-term solutions for that. What's going to provide long-term solutions for you feeling like a piece of dirt when you work at Facebook, monitoring, moderating, fact-checking, what's the other word? Curating people. These are all words that they're using at Facebook to describe people's posts. Or when you're working at LinkedIn and you may be controlling what career opportunities somebody has based on their profile, meaning is what color is their skin, you know, what gender are they, what religion are they, what are their political views, who did they vote for, etc. And if you get one set of people that you give all the opportunities to at LinkedIn because they have the right, in quotation marks, the right profile, which means left-leaning, brown-skinned, female, maybe their gender is, they don't know what gender they are, so they put unknown or they identify as an Apache helicopter maybe, you're going to feel like a piece of dirt at the end of the day. Your conscience is going to bother you. And if you are not aware, you're not necessarily going to realize why that is. You're just going to get to the end of the day, you're going to have a completely yuck feeling on the inside of you. You're going to go home and you're going to shout at your wife or your girlfriend. You know, you're going to shout at the guy next to you in traffic, you know, because you've been destroying people's lives all day long, and your spirit man on the inside doesn't want to do that. Your spirit man on the inside wants to make a beautiful, happy, positive world, not just a beautiful, happy, positive you. It's no good doing yoga for 5 hours a day to feel good so that you can then go to your corporate job and wreak destruction on the world at some level, whether that's poisoning oil wells or being, you know, an employee at the Ministry of Truth, 1984 Fashbook, as I used to call them, or whether it's limiting people's career opportunities at LinkedIn. These are just 3 examples that that the Daily Mail mentioned in their article, that, you know, that these were companies that this startup Better Up is going to work for, these 3 companies and others. If they just stopped all their satanic carry on, then they wouldn't have any need to hire a bunch of psychologists to work with them to make their employees feel better, because their employees would feel great. Anyway.
Yeah, we'll be right back.
Yeah.
Just a couple quick comments. So, class, we are back on YouTube. The probationary period is over, and the Ron Gibson channel is back on YouTube. So if you want to find us there, you can find us there. Of course, we can find us on Genesis Communications Network, GCN Live, LIVE.com. There are archives right there. You can go to BitChute, and you can look up the Ron Gibson channel. You go to BitChute, BITCHUTE.com, and you can look up USA Space Preparers, and you'll find us there. Same thing with YouTube, and we're all over the internet. And thank you, Ron Gibson. And we caused it. We caused the 2-week suspension. USA Prepares caused it, and I apologize for what was said on USA Prepares that got us banned. And it wasn't profanity. It wasn't, it was describing articles in the public domain. And that's what did it. And so there's certain things that you can't talk about. And I really don't have a problem with YouTube saying that, hey, y'all, if you want to be on our site, there are certain things you can say, certain things you can't say. And if they tell us what they are, if that's what they want to do, that's their prerogative. Okay? Just like I don't want people dumping their trash on my front lawn. It's our property, and we don't want that. So, you know, we can write those rules, and they can write their rules. So I respect them for that. I don't necessarily agree, but you know, they are in the business of making a profit. That's what they do. And they command a pretty large audience. That being said, you can find us back on YouTube. Thank you very much for making that happen. And thank you, Ron Gibson. Guineith, you mentioned hydraulic fracturing of the earth. I have a problem with it. I've heard some stupid people say that, I don't have a problem with that. It's okay. You know, we're getting gas, we're getting oil. It's good. Let's just beat up the earth. There's no escape. We wreck this planet. There's no getting off. Okay? At least in your lifetime, class. So fracking is a bad thing. Now think about this. Corporations can beat up the earth. They can put hydraulic fluid, water, and chemicals in the earth and set off an explosion and crack the earth underneath and damage the aquifers, the water supply. Let's say you did something really simple. And I'm not recommending this. I'm just trying to draw an analogy. Let's say you called a press conference and you said, I got this quart of oil. And it's a sealed quart. And I'm going to go down to 4th and Vine, and I'm going to pour this quart of oil down the storm drain. And I'd like to have the media come and video this and put it on the news. Do you think that you won't be arrested for pouring a quart of oil down the storm drain? Do you think you would? Or do you think everything would be okay? And people say, that's really cool. What? Do you see that guy? He just poured oil down the storm drain. That's something, isn't it? I think you'd be arrested for polluting, destroying the environment. And you'd be spending the next, couple months in the clink. For careless and reckless behavior, dangerous behavior. But corporations can get away with doing way more than that. They can do it with dynamite, C4, plastic explosives, and chemicals. That is hydraulic fracking. Those are the 2 comments that I want to make. Gwyneth, any comments about what I just said?
Yeah, what if you put that, oil down the storm drain and then set a match to it? That's basically what they're doing with hydraulic fracking, is they're pouring all these chemicals down, that they're drilling a hole down into the aquifer, which is water that has been stored by God in the heart of the earth for people to use for their benefit, for absolutely to make death bloom. Okay? And it comes from up in mountains, hundreds or sometimes thousands of kilometers, thousands of miles away, sometimes hundreds of miles away. The water soaks down into the water table, which is what I was talking about in miniature earlier, and flows down. Sometimes it takes thousands of years to flow down into the aquifer. And then you can drill a hole down into the aquifer, and it will often come up under its own pressure. That's called an artesian well. Well, what you're doing is you're capping off that artesian well. You're pouring poison down it, and then you're setting a match to it. Is basically what you're doing in hydraulic fracking. If you and I did that, we'd be arrested.
In this article on dailymail.co.uk, Harry has a statement about why he's joining Better Up. I'm going to read this. This is a quote. And I take exception to what he had to say. It exhibits laziness. Just like his facial hair exhibits laziness. It says, quote, "First of all, I'm really excited to be joining the Better Up team and community. Thanks for having me." End quote. Now, there's more to it. But the problem that I have with this is thanks. Thanks for having me. So this guy joins allegedly a company bigger than $1 billion, and he says, thanks. He allegedly was born into royalty and probably attended the finest schools, but he doesn't know how to use the words thank you. Thanks. That's a shortcut. It's laziness. It's like wearing shoes that don't have laces because it's too hard to tie your shoes. I was taught when I was back in the 70s that when you apply for a job, you wear shoes that have laces. Because if you wear loafers, that is an indicator of laziness. And a person who is lazy, who exhibits laziness by not even being able to tie his own shoes or wanting to, would be a lazy employee. That's what I was taught. So my sneakers are not slip-on. They actually have laces. And you tie them up. And my boots have laces. And you tie them up. I don't have slip-on shoes. I don't wear flip-flops. So that's just a comment about thanks. To me, that is an indicator of laziness. And I don't appreciate it when people say thanks. And so when I write an email, Guineith, have you ever seen an email from me that said thanks, or do they say thank you?
No, they say thank you.
Mm-hmm. How do you feel about that?
Yep. That feels good. It really does.
Mm-hmm.
And, usually when I finish up my emails, one thing that really I was raised in the 1980s doing my, public training camp education during the 1980s and 1990s. And we were taught how to write letters. And the world has changed. But back in the day, you started a letter, dear blah, 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 whatever the name was. And then at the end of it, depending on how well you knew the person, you wrote yours faithfully if you knew the person well, or yours sincerely if you knew the person less well, or maybe regards, maybe, but that was considered extremely informal. Now these days I've had to fit in with culture. Nobody writes letters and starts them dear anymore. So, but normally at the top of an email, even if it's a short one, sometimes I don't, but that's not very common. Even a short email, I normally write the person's name at the top, and then I write my message, and then at the bottom something like, God bless, I'll speak with you soon. Isn't that right, Vincent?
Well, let me read it. I've got an email, the latest one that you sent me, and it says, Vincent. And what this is about, class, is I thought it'd be fun to talk about, Harry and his new job. So I said, I sent an email to Guineith. I only had a couple seconds to send it, so it was really quick. And what I got back was, Vincent, I'd love to discuss this. And you go on to say, talk about a couple other things. And you say, in closing, God bless you, Vincent, I'll speak with you soon, ... Guineith. It's exactly,
yeah.
And that's what you did.
And that's my normal form for writing an email. Because I have had to, nobody writes, but I wish they did. If everybody was still starting their letters with Dear Vincent, and then yours sincerely, or yours faithfully, then I would do that. But the whole world has become less formal.
Right.
And, I've had to adjust my writing to that. But when I get emails where I'm not addressed in the email, and it's just a few lines, it's like a sticky note that you put on your fridge, or it's like a note that somebody might hand to you in passing, because when I was learning how to write letters, email didn't exist. And when you wrote a letter, you wrote it out on a piece of paper, or if you had a typewriter, then you typed it. And then, or if you were really sophisticated, you had a word processor, and then you would print it out on your printer. That was considered highly sophisticated. Just about nobody had word processors when I was going through the stage of going through high school and knowing how to. And I really wish I'd learned how to type. That's one great regret, is I still do a very advanced henpecking method rather than typing. But, I go through and I read the email generally, and I check for typos. And I check for if it makes sense, if the grammar is good, if the sentence structure is good, and if I've included images, if the image placement is correct. And because of that, usually, this is even on short emails I do this, and usually because of that, my emails are well structured. And I hardly ever write actual physical letters these days. And maybe I should, but the thing is I live out in the middle of nowhere, and getting to the post office is a little bit of an obstacle. So, you know, I would be waiting weeks for a reply if the person did reply at all, because, nobody uses the postal system for communications anymore. They use it for sending bills and sending junk. That's just how it is. And for government communications, that's just how it is. And for sending and receiving packages is the other thing that people use the postal system for. Very few people use the postal system for writing letters anymore. They use email. And like I say, you've got to adjust to this change of technology, and it certainly is more convenient. But I think that, this is a microcosm of a bigger problem. People have forgotten how to write proper emails. People have forgotten how to write proper letters that start with addressing the person that you are communicating with. You write the body of the communication. If it's a long email, you might write the purpose in the first paragraph and then go into details and then have a conclusion at the end. And if you look carefully at my emails, especially the longer ones, and some of them can be 2,000 words for an email. Isn't that right, Vincent?
That's absolutely right. You're right.
And then you have, at the end, you have your salutation, which is like yours faithfully, yours sincerely, God bless, I'll speak with you soon, And then you sign off. You sign your name. People apparently think that, they can write an email and not have their name at the bottom of it. Now, they think, they know my email address. They know it's me. Yeah, but it's manners. It's etiquette to conclude your salutation with your name. It's like if you're doing a beautiful work of art. I mentioned this last week. You do a beautiful work of art. You're proud of it. You put your signature in the bottom corner because you want to say, this is me. This is something that I have created. This is a part, and it really is a part of who you are. When you write a communication, that is a part of who you are, and it's, or if you write a book or if you're drawing art or anything like this. But I don't think that Harry could draw anything if he wanted to. This is it. Getting back to Harry and Meghan. Meghan knows how to pose for photographs. How's that? That's amazing. That's actually an art in itself. And I've done that, not in a professional basis, but I have, posed for not unclad photography, but photography for, to just display. For instance, I had my photo taken about 12 months ago with my cards, because I was thinking of getting more card reading work, and I needed a professional photo taken with my deck of cards. And so I did myself up in a costume with a scarf, with my hair done, and I sat there with my cards and I laid them out in a replica of a very, very famous photo of a woman by the name of Pamela Coleman Smith, who was the artist who did the artwork on the Rider-Waite tarot deck. And I thought to myself, wouldn't it be great if I could replicate that pose? And so I did that. That is an art form. Being a photographic model is an art form. But, you know, that's something that Megan can do, and apparently she's good at it. But I don't think that she wants to do that now that she's supposed to be a duchess. You know, I don't think that she's so willing to engage in that line of work anymore. This is it. Oh, my gosh. He has to do something for a living. What's he going to do? But, you know, maybe he could take up some cause like keeping Berkshire pigs alive. Maybe he could go and make good relationships with his supposed father with his project of keeping the Berkshire pig breed alive.
All right, we'll be right back.
Somehow,
talking about etiquette, and you know, lately people call here and you know, I say hello and they go right into what they want, you know, demands. And so I don't answer the phone with hello very often anymore. So what I do now is I've got a few phrases or paragraphs that I just start off with. And my latest one is I just answer the phone. Instead of saying hello, I say, thank you for calling me back. Hey, Jerry was there twice and they're thriving. We've never seen roaches that are resistant to Durakill 21. So we sent them off to the lab and they called the EPA. So I guess you can expect a visit from the EPA this afternoon.
Yeah, that's pretty funny.
Well, another one is I say, hey, thank you for calling me back. We deposited the check twice and it's bounced again. So do you want me to tear it up, send it back, or put it with the others? So,
yep. Hey, I thought of some things that Harry could do for a living.
Okay.
But it would involve him reconciling with his family, his supposed family. Okay? He could learn to be an auto mechanic. He could go and have a talk to Grandma, and Grandma could teach him how to be an auto mechanic.
Yeah, but first he has to have desire.
Pretty old.
Yeah, but
Grandma's pretty old, but I'm sure she still knows how to put a Land Rover together.
Mm-hmm. Guineith, one of the things that we're going to talk about was the Washington State Initiative 522 of 2012. And you want to take a couple minutes to talk about that? What happened? This was simply that the people of Washington wanted to require labeling of their food. So they wanted to know if genetically engineered food was part of the package, the jar, the bag, whatever it was, they wanted to know. So they had this initiative called I-522, and it was 2012. So here's what happened. It was defeated. Why was it defeated? Well, according to a website called GMAR, it's the Grocery, I'll just say it this way, Grocery Manufacturers Association releases secret donor list. So, as previously reported, the Grocery Manufacturers Association got caught red-handed violating Washington state fair election laws by running a money laundering slush fund designed to conceal the identities of food companies giving money to block, meaning prevent, Initiative 522, which would be the labeling of what's in your food. So who were these companies that did this illegal activity? Well, Abbott Nutrition. This is according to, let's see, OMSJ.org. Okay. Abbott Nutrition, Bimbo Bakeries, Bruce Foods, Bumblebee Foods, Bush Brothers, Campbell Soup, Cargill, Clorox, because they own Burt's Bees, the Coca-Cola owner of Odwella, ConAgra Foods, Dean Foods, Del Monte, General Mills, Hershey, Hormel, the J.M. Smucker Company, Kellogg, Land O'Lakes, McCormick, that'd be the Spice People, Mondelez, that would be Nabisco Biscuits, Ritz Crackers, Ocean Spray, Pepsi, Pinnacle, Rich, and others. Sunny Delight, Welsh Foods. So, you need to read this article, class, but allegedly there was some money laundering to prevent you and us from learning who was trying to block the labeling of what's in our food. Guineith?
I'm glad that you brought that up. I'd completely forgotten about it. This is absolutely heinous. This is disgusting. Meanwhile, I can't make jam in my farmhouse kitchen and put it on the gate to sell because I will be fined hundreds of thousands of dollars if I do. And meanwhile, my jam contains sugar. It contains fruit pulp that's grown without herbicides on the farm. The sugar at the moment, unfortunately, is not organic sugar. But we're working on that. I'm working on getting some sugar cane growing. And when it is, then I will have organic jam, which is nice. But I would not be able to put even one jar of jam at my farm gate to sell, because otherwise the health department would be on me like a ton of bricks because I don't have a commercial kitchen. There's nothing wrong with my jam. I've been eating it for years. My children have been eating it for their entire lives. And, you know, it's delicious, it's nutritious, it's wonderful, it's the best jam out there. But I would not be able to sell even one jar of my excellent jam at my farm gate.
Yeah, same thing with our grass-fed cows. Same thing with our grass-fed cows.
Yeah.
We can't sell, we can't package meat and sell it without the government approval. So where did this article come from? Secret list of food companies funding GMO labeling, opposition slush fund revealed after illegal activities of GMA exposed. Naturalnews.com. And the article was October 18th, 2013.